The button has been pushed. Hello and welcome. What's up, guys? We had an awesome episode on Monday that we released for the John Hartford Fiddle Tunes project. And Shay, what's going on, brother?
Man, I am just I got a buddy that's opening up a bar, so I've been helping him out, and I'm sitting here looking, and I'm realizing from all my years of office work how soft my hands have gotten. I spent all day yesterday wiring cables and shit, and it's made me realize how weak I am, guys. I'm not a real man. I don't know what to do about it.
Well, I can guarantee the person we have on for our episode today does not have soft hands.
No, sir.
Zeb Snyder is here to join us today, you guys. And if you don't know Zeb, get out there immediately. He recently just had a new album, and that's why we're actually having this episode, is because, Zeb, we wanted to learn more about you. Shay and I are obviously crazy, and we do this podcast, so we're always looking for fun and interesting guests, but I had seen some of your picking videos, and I was like, God damn, who is this guy? Right? Like, where did you're from North Carolina, right?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. This is great. But yeah, I grew up in North Carolina. I'm from Lexington, North Carolina, which is actually, central North Carolina. It's just south of Winston-Salem, just north of Charlotte. So I didn't grow up right in the middle of music country, but I was close, or I should say bluegrass music
You're in
country.
Bermuda's Triangle.
Yeah, a little bit. But my folks, my dad discovered bluegrass music, and I think he heard Bill Monroe on the Opry was how he first heard about it. And me and my sister started playing music when we were real young. My parents wanted that to be part of our education growing up. So my parents didn't know how to play, which is not exactly the standard bluegrass story. A lot of times it gets passed down, but
That's really interesting.
yeah, they didn't know how to play, so they bought lessons for me and my sister. So her name's Samantha Snyder. She's a great musician in her own right. But she's 3.5 years younger than me. So we started out playing classical music because that was a thing that they could do. We did the Suzuki method. So they had, registered teachers and books and CDs you could buy in this whole program. So they just did that for us to get started. Yeah, 4 years of that. So did that for 4 years, but I was listening to bluegrass and stuff in the meantime. I loved bluegrass.
So that people understand, like, you were playing classical guitar, right?
Oh, yeah.
And what kind of pieces were you practicing and playing for those 4 years?
Well, it was just, I can't hardly remember, well, I can't remember any of it that I can still play, but it was just whatever was in the Suzuki method. I think I did like at least 4 books of the Suzuki method, and, I think it's all hazy now. I think there might have been some sight reading involved, but I sure as hell can't remember any of that. So but I do remember. I'm about guarantee you that at the time I leaned on my ear back then because they always had a companion CD with the book of sheet music, and I leaned that way hard from early on and got pretty lazy about reading, which turned out okay for what I've wound up doing for a living.
Well, as a music teacher, you can't be saying that.
Well, I've got my method. Trust me, we do everything by ear and a little bit of scales written out and stuff like that. But I'm actually still that way. I teach like with zero tablature. I've been doing that for 8 years, and everything's just by ear and by some other methods that I put together.
That's insane. And we had Chris Henry on a
Love
few episodes ago. Yeah, and he and his family did the same, but his family comes from a line of musicians, right? Like Red has been ripping his whole life. So for you and your father and mom, they didn't play at all originally when you guys had started, which is wild because didn't you guys have a Snyder Family Band?
Yeah, we did. So after I started playing bluegrass, that's when I kind of took ownership of music. I liked it before when I was doing classical, but I wasn't just passionate about it. But when I started playing bluegrass, I was obsessed. So, my sister was the same way, and we were playing together a little bit, and we wanted to have a band, and so we bought an upright bass, and I learned how to play it, and I taught my dad how to play. And we went on to have a family band for 12 years and made 6 albums.
What does Samantha play?
She's a fiddle player.
Oh, wow.
You taught your parents to play.
Taught my dad, yeah.
I love how backwards that is because we talk to lots of people on here, and then you talk to people, even at concerts and stuff, before the show comes up or whatever, and it's almost always the same story of like, yeah, my pappy did it, my daddy did it, my mommy did it, and then I did it, And this is the complete backwards way to do that. That's awesome. And how old would you have been when you taught your parents to play again?
11, 12.
I
Yeah.
love that. That is awesome.
Yeah. Well, we were all kind of learning at the same time. I just figured out, I was playing anything I could get my hands on. I'd go early to the music store where I took lessons and play the mandolins and banjos and just whatever I could do. So I played bass a lot at the time just for fun. And I figured out it was, the same tuning as the bottom four strings of the guitar, just octaves lower. And we just all kind of figured it out together. And it was a ton of fun. And my dad crushed it too. I don't know how much people know. He held down a full-time job the entire time we had the family band. So we never did it like he used all of his vacation
he's
days.
Structuring his tours around PTO and off day.
Yeah, no, but
Yeah, that's like when I'm bothering Shay. I'm like, hey, can you do this interview? He's like, man, I got a regular job.
Yeah. Yeah, but he crushed it the entire time. He had a great feel, great right hand technique. He just picked that up early on, and he crushed it for years.
That's amazing, man. And you said that you love bluegrass, right? So you're going through the Suzuki method, which is classical music, right?
Yeah.
You're living in North Carolina, but so what was it that like sparked you to then be like, that was it, right? Because I know that I've read that you as a guitar player and a picker really looked up to like Brian Sutton, right? And obviously Tony Rice.
Yeah.
So was there like a moment when you were a young boy like learning to play? Because did you start playing the Suzuki method before you had learned about bluegrass, or did you know about bluegrass but started in classical?
No, it's what you just said. I had known about bluegrass the whole time. My family always had that kind of music taste. I think the classical thing happened, like I said, more for educational purposes than anything. I mean, my mom would listen to some classical, but it wasn't something that we listened to regular. So I had been listening to bluegrass for a long time. But
So it was just two parents that didn't know how to teach music, and they're like, of course you teach classical music, right?
yeah, it just seemed like the most logical thing, and also the most organized thing at the time. Like bluegrass, I mean, even to this day, there's tons of options now for teachers, but it is all over the place. There's not been like one refined method that's come down the line at the level of Suzuki or something like that. So for people who don't know how to get started, that's super appealing to have that safety and that reputation to turn to for something like Suzuki.
Well, and the structure, right? Because like you said, you
Yeah.
had workbooks.
Right. But no, I was listening to bluegrass for a long time, and there were a few things that I can remember that were huge in kind of lighting that fire. They came along at different times, but I saw Doc Watson live when I was about 7 years old. I think it was just about the time that I started taking my first lessons. And I saw him at the Blue Ridge Music Center in Galax, Virginia. Because like I said, living in Lexington, Lexington itself is not too remarkable for music, but we could have easy access to Western North Carolina, where Brian Sutton was, or go up to Galax, Virginia, or Mount Airy, North Carolina, or any of these places where the music's really rich. So I was always in it. But I saw Doc at the Blue Ridge Music Center when I was about 7, and it blew my mind. I think Eddie Pennington opened for him too, so I got like a great finger-picking guitar player right off the bat, listening to him, and loved Doc and loved how he put on a show and everything, and was just impressed with all of it. I loved his music from early. And I saw a lot of other people there too. I saw Del McCurry there, and been a big fan of his for a long time. And there was quite a bit of live music that happened when I was young, and just CDs that we would get that I'd listen to obsessively.
That's awesome. So then when you started transitioning from Suzuki into bluegrass, you get your dad to pick up the stand-up bass. Sam sawing that thing in half. When did you guys decide, like, hey, we're going to start a family band? Like, what? Because obviously it's big in bluegrass, right? And we see it all the time, all over the place, from wee little ones all the way up to great-grandfathers.
Yeah, it happened pretty quick. My sister and I had been playing really small duet gigs in the community when we were doing classical stuff. So we started, exploring playing bluegrass like pretty much as soon as we started playing it. I don't know, that sounds maybe a little misguided, but I think it just sort of happens naturally. Bluegrass is so as a business structure and as a community, it's so easy to get into. You know, the barriers to entry are really low in a lot of ways, and that has to do with the culture. You know, it's a really friendly
It's so accepting.
culture. Yeah, it is, and it's just like even the music itself. I mean, the way the art form exists and continues to exist is kind of a community folk art, you know, passed down, learned by ear thing. So we got into it pretty quick. I had a good teacher when I started down in Ashburn, North Carolina, named Tim Moon. And just before the family band, he put together a little like student band of his students that had me and my sister in it. So we kind of got a little experience doing that, just at a couple shows. But we started playing with the family band and just found some opportunities to play. You know, there's so many opportunities, especially at that time in North Carolina and Virginia and Georgia, South Carolina too. And we just started playing where we could and had some cool opportunities pop up and just sort of rode that along. We did all the contests too, all the fiddlers conventions and guitar and fiddle competitions and everything like that. So we were doing something just about every weekend at the height of the season, you know.
Meanwhile, Dad's going to work for the other 5 days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, that just blows my mind. I can picture the reaction if I had asked my dad to do something like that. It would there wouldn't have even been a conversation. He would have laughed and walked out of the room. That's really cool. And that's indicative of the bluegrass community in general, because it's typically pretty supportive. And your parents are just like, "Well, hell yeah, let's go, let's do it."
Yeah. I think he might have been a little hesitant, just questioning his own ability. So we just bought the bass for his birthday without asking, and then
I like that approach.
And then jumped in. But it didn't take him long, man. He was all over it. He was, he's where I really get my passion for music and stuff. I mean, both my parents, but my dad, even if he'd never played a note, I would have got my music taste from him, because he discovered bluegrass for our family. And I'm also like a huge rocker and country guy too. So, he had this record collection that I grew up on of, all the Lynyrd Skynyrd albums leading up to the plane crash, and some Allman Brothers stuff. And he was a big drum fan. So after Skynyrd, his interest kind of turned into whoever had the coolest drummer. So you had Rush and the Police and anything where the drumming was awesome.
All right. So that's actually really awesome, because on one of your songs on the new album, it literally sounds like a couple of licks from the Ballad of Curtis Lowe. Howard Truman.
Yeah.
Man,
No,
is that on purpose?
No, not literally, but you're right. I mean, that influence is there. It's probably just the fact that I'm playing slide.
No, for sure. But it was just like, because for me, like, my dad was a huge Skynyrd, like Southern rock and then country, right? And like, that was his influence. He didn't know bluegrass, so I didn't know bluegrass, but like, that was my foundation, whereas my mom was like the deadhead hippie, right?
Yeah.
So then I had like hardcore country and Southern rock dad, and then like hippie mom, and then they made me, which is a problem for everyone. But so like, for your dad, were you guys going to shows together? Like, did you go see any of those rock bands? Because obviously like, the bluegrass scene is different, right? And like it's warming and accepting, and like we love seeing like a little 5-year-old just ripping away, right? Or knocking their shoe. Like there's a lot to it, right? But also like the rock scene is different, but you can hear the influence in your lyrics and your playing, that you have some of that. So where did that come from, other than just, was it just the record sets?
It was mainly just the records. We didn't go to any shows when I was younger. When I got a little older, I think I was in college when me and Dad went to see Charlie Daniels at the Lawrence Joel Coliseum in Winston, and it was awesome. He was doing
burnt it down.
He did, man. That night on that year, I forget what year it was, but he was selecting like which of his classic albums he was going to feature in the set list. And that day I think it was the Fire on the Mountain album. So they did Trudy early on, and I was like, that first riff hit, and I was like, yes, this is going to be a good night. But no, we didn't see a lot of that stuff live growing up. It was more, we were around the bluegrass all the time, and then I was always like just aggressively stretching out. I was just always trying to grab more influences and hunt down more stuff. So I would ask him about those records.
As you were practicing when you were younger and you were playing in the family band and getting some of these influences, what were you doing to change your playing and picking styles?
Well, I mean, listening to everything was always a big part of it. And there was also some kind of practical stuff. I mean, our family band was only ever a three-piece of guitar, bass, and fiddle. So it was unconventional when we were at our most traditional, just by the fact that it never had banjo and mandolin. So, like, we always were learning how to do things a little bit differently. And, not necessarily reinventing the wheel. I mean, Tony Rice laid down the blueprint for the no banjo thing, starting with the Manzanita album and going through how the Tony Rice unit sounded forever. But then we had, we were all, I mean, funny enough, mentioning Rush a while ago, we were kind of inspired by how huge Rush sounded as a trio. So we took something from that as a little three-piece family band. But we always did things a little differently. And then as I just listened to everything, me and my sister, having started the band, I mean, we had complete creative control too. I mean, our parents just supported what we did. So we were trying whatever we wanted to try. And also, with it not being the way we made a living, it was pretty purely artistic too. Like,
Yep.
we weren't setting out to piss anybody off, but we tried pretty much whatever we wanted to try musically.
Well, we're the
So
same except opposite. We push some buttons. Some buttons have been pushed. That's it.
understood. But yeah, so yeah, we just kind of, it always evolved from whatever I was listening to at the time. And the same thing with my sister. And I still operate that way. Like, anything that I do is based on some kind of inspiration that I picked up. I never do something in music just because I should. It's always like, I've heard a sound, it's inspiring me, I'm chasing it. And that's how I get better as a musician. That's how I come up with ideas, is like, the heartbeat of everything is what I'm listening to, and then that comes out in what I play.
And how much do you think that plays in the role of you knowing how to play all these different instruments? Because I've seen you literally pick up everything.
Oh, that's huge. Listening to everything, you'll listen to the same record different ways. My buddy Jamie Harper told me about this one time when I was about 13 or so. He was doing some lessons and showed me some cool things about rhythm guitar. And he showed me how if you focus, you can almost mix a record with your ear. You listen to the same record that you've heard before and you focus different ways, and you can almost make stuff stand out. So I would go through the same records listening, like with a mandolin ear or with a bass ear or whatever it was. And I also constantly played along with my favorite records. That was one of the main ways that I taught myself how to do things and picked up subtleties. Because I talk to my students about this stuff all the time. You can just learn a song, but when you want to take it to the next level, you have to get into the subtleties of bluegrass, the different dynamic shifts and the ways that people play with time and all this kind of thing. So you can get that by playing along with the great records. And I would do that on every instrument I knew. So it'd be Bluegrass Album Band Volume 1 guitar night, and then it'd be, the next night I'd play the whole thing with bass, and the next night play the whole thing with mandolin, and just doing stuff like that over and over again. I kind of picked up different angles of it like that.
I'm curious. So like as Kodi had said, it doesn't look like there's a lot you can't play. Excuse me. So do you? And you had said earlier, things just grab you, like you hear a riff or a tone or something. Like, ooh, I like that, and you chase that down. Did you, over the course of learning to play, decide I want to play all these instruments, or is it a matter of you're listening to an album and you hear a mandolin riff or a dobro riff and go, I need to explore that, and you pick up that instrument and play along?
Yeah, I think it's kind of all the above. I mean, as soon as I started playing bluegrass, I kind of wanted to play everything. I never could get the damn fiddle, and I still haven't. So I'll just leave that to Samantha.
We'll leave that to Samantha.
She's got the fiddle covered. But I was pretty excited. My first teacher was a multi-instrumentalist too, and he would kind of do that during a lesson, like to give you a little bit more experience during the lesson there. Like, he'd have the guitar and be playing with you, showing you what to play. And then once you got it learned, he'd pick up the mandolin and chop so you could feel that, how to play with different parts of a band. So I was exposed to him doing that really early on, and I just wanted to play everything. Actually, the first instrument I ever wanted to play was the mandolin, and I got like a cheap one for my 5th birthday, and there weren't any teachers around at the time, and I didn't pursue it until then, or until later. I started doing the classical lessons when I was 7. But as soon as I started playing bluegrass when I was about 11 or 12, I went and found that mandolin and tuned it up and played it till my fingers turned gray, and took it in the car everywhere and broke strings and all that. And I'd take other stuff I had, but before I got each one of my instruments, I had an old cheap guitar, and I would take it and string it up different ways. Like I'd take the E and A string off of it and put a treble E through the A slot and tune it up like a banjo and roll on that. Or I'd tune it like a dobro and play it with a piece of plastic that was shaped like a slide until I could get me a dobro. I was doing all that stuff from an early age.
That is wild, man. Is there so as you like with all this experience, right? As you're playing in the family band, were there certain songs or was there like a moment that you remember from that you're like, oh man, we absolutely crushed this every time?
I don't know. I think I'm way too self-critical to ever say that. I look back now.
Isn't every artist say that, right?
Yeah.
Like you guys are chasing perfection, and for us as like fans that listen, we're like, oh my God, that was amazing. And you're like, oh, I missed this chord or skipped this or whatever it was.
Yeah, I've had to learn about that over the years because I think, as tense as that can be, there is some value to having that. Like you say, it seems like a lot of great musicians do have that tendency, so there must be something valuable about it. But I've learned over the years, especially the past few years, to be able to analyze a show at a couple different levels, where I have learned to consider separately what the audience is going to perceive versus what I'm going to perceive. And that's tough, but I've gotten better at it the longer I've done this. And so after a show, I'll be able to think about how did the audience feel? Did we get to them? Did we hit the emotional points? Did they have good response? And I can look at all those things and check all those boxes and feel good about that. And then I can think about, my technique was tight tonight, or I went out on a limb on that one song and busted my ass or whatever it was. And I can go through all those things at two separate levels and kind of keep myself hopefully a little bit more mentally healthy about it, so that I can, keep getting better, but not totally lose my mind.
Yeah, but also like not having that ego about it, be like, oh yeah, I crushed it every night, right? And then you're like Corey Feldman up there playing the guitar.
That's a great pull. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's yeah, and like you say, all my buddies are like that. We kind of, every band I'm in, we kind of talk about the show afterward and kind of unwind and talk about what went good and what didn't and everything. But with the family band stuff, I think the one thing that we did, I can remember, if I can actually, answer this without being too self-critical, we closed every show with Sally Gooden for years. And at first we just did it as a barn burner and kind of kept it pretty safe. But then I heard the recording of Tony Rice doing it for like 8 minutes with an extended solo. And there was one weekend, I think we were in Thomasville somewhere in North Carolina. I told Dad, I'm like, just hang on. I'm gonna try something. And I played it extended, and so it just grew from there. So like that was always a big show closure thing. And I can remember, the first time I tried that and how much adrenaline that gave me and how much fun that was. Because I've always been like, improvising's been one of my favorite parts of music for about as long as I've been able to even attempt to do it. So I was like, always trying to get more jammy with everything we did. And the That's family awesome. Band, funny enough, for something called the Snyder Family Band, got really jammy in a lot of ways. There was some covers you wouldn't expect and some extended things, and it was a weird family band.
That's awesome. So for us, like Shay and I, we're just music fans. We're not musicians. So like,
believe me, I've tried. You don't want that.
Yeah, no. Steven's hand, like no. But what I love to do is talking to people that really know, and obviously a plethora of all these instruments. Where are you going in your headspace? Like when you're ripping and you're just going somewhere, like how does is it a feel? Like, or is it a sense? Do you know that you're going to go into this progression? Is there something that's comfortable, but then it's never the same, right? So then it's always like, oh, am I going to reverse this? Like, help us try to understand as simpletons, like, when we're watching you guys up there flat picking, going somewhere, where are you between your ears?
Well, everybody's answer to this is going to be a little bit different, and mine might sound a little bit technical, and to a certain extent it is, but there's sort of an organic thing that comes out of the technical foundation of it. But I think about numbers all the time, and so I hear music mainly in numbers because there's so many patterns in music, and I'll try to not to get too technical with how I explain this, but it comes from just the foundation of there being 7 notes in the major scale. I'm thinking from those 7 notes and then the ways that you divert from them to get other sounds like the blues scale or something like that. So that's actually how I hear. I don't have like a perfect pitch prodigy talent, but I've got real solid relativity. So I can hear how things relate to one another. So maybe a better way of saying that is I can hear how far apart notes are from one another. And
No, it totally
that,
makes sense.
I can hear in what manner they're harmonizing. So I make decisions on that. Basically, I explain it to my students this way, is when I'm improvising, this is a real highbrow way of saying it, but it works. When I'm improvising, I have an idea of how I want to make the audience feel, and I know what numbers of the scale are going to make them feel that way. So that's what I play. And that seems kind of Terminator technical-ish, but having like thought about that a lot and trained on that a lot, it turns into a second language eventually. So it's not really a computer running in my head as much as it just sounds like I described it, but that is like the technical basis for what I'm doing. And then the longer you do it, it turns into more of a flow. And the way that I get to that flow has a lot to do with technique, because I've trained long enough at this point on the music theory side of things. There's always more to do on that. I'm still like in infancy, but I've reached a certain point where I can have a stream of consciousness and flow on that. So a lot of what I'm doing on stage is actually trying to stay out of my own way. And that's where your physical technique comes into play, because tension robs everything, right? I'm trying to stay as loose as possible in my right hand and my left hand. This is an intense style of music. It's fast, it's loud, and guitar takes a beating because lead guitar is hard to hear in a bluegrass band. So I have to fight tension all the time. If I can stay as loose as possible with my right hand while still maintaining power, and if I can keep my left hand nice and relaxed where I'm not cramping to get to anything, usually the ideas will flow if I can stay out of my own way. So that's kind of my zen on stage, is a bunch of technical knowledge that I've kind of worked through and then figuring out a way to let it flow in the moment.
But it's cool because, like, for us as fans, we can feel those different emotions of those tones, right? Like, we've talked about, like, evil, or we call it, like, Sith Lord, like, those heavy, deep cut, like, you can feel that, right? And so it's cool to, like, have a technical understanding, and obviously a lot of people that listen probably do play the guitar, so hearing some of that stuff helps them understand, too, if they're going to get somewhere. For me, what I want to learn more is about the evolution of Zeb, right? So what did Dad have to go back to work? Why did the family band end? Like, what was the?
No, it was more of a natural ending. It was more kind of a business thing, man. We played for a long time. I'll tell you this: it's tough to market something that has family band in the name when you don't play family band music. Because like I said, there's a branding thing to the family band thing. And I mean, I grew up in that community and I'm friends with a bunch of those people, but we never were really that type of brand. So, usually family bands have, a lot of vocals,
an old traditional pick, you're going to get some traditional foundational bluegrass, and here comes Zeb with the 8-minute Sally Gooden.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it was hard to explain to people what we were doing. and we kind of, we went with that band name early on and never changed it. And, just grew
just
up.
needed to be like Jimi Hendrix and add an experience at the end.
Right.
Of it, like the Snyder Family Band experience.
Should have. Yeah. But, it's, we grew up doing it. I mean, I was, about 11 or 12 when we started doing shows, and I was in my 20s when we quit. But, we had made our last couple albums, and for me, they were kind of musically my favorite. And they got decent response, but just, it was hard to take it much further after a certain point. And, a bunch of other stuff in personal life goes down and stuff like that. Nothing too dark or scandalous or anything, but, it just kind of naturally came to an end. There was no big breakup or anything, but we just kind of got to where it was like, I don't think this has the momentum anymore. It kind of ran out of steam, and it got time to try different things.
So then how did you transition to your next gig? You obviously knew that this is what you were doing, right? You've been doing it for a decade. You're not going to stop.
Yeah, well, a couple things happened. I mean, I went to college and I actually didn't go for music. I went to college and got a degree in mathematical economics in case I needed a backup plan to music. So
So
I
you
went
literally,
Music and math are two sides of the same coin, though.
for sure. Yeah. But I had done that. I was doing the family band throughout college, though. But when I graduated, the family band quit not long after I graduated. To start making a living, I started teaching music full time online, which I'm still doing. So I started doing that right away. And then I graduated in 2017. In 2018, the family band quit, and my buddy Daryl Webb called me to go play for him. And Daryl is somebody that I've known since I was 12 years old, or 11 maybe. He came up to me at the first Bluegrass Festival I ever went to, Bluegrass First Class in Asheville, North Carolina. He came up to me. He was playing for Rhonda Vincent at the time, and I was standing backstage holding a guitar. And Daryl came up to me with his guitar on and said, "Son, pick one." And we started jamming, and we've been friends ever since. So I played for him for a year doing Daryl Webb band stuff, and that was my first full-time gig outside of the family band, which was great. I learned a ton, had a ton of great experiences, saw a different side of the business, all that kind of thing.
you
And
guys were
then,
also touring.
yeah, we toured all over, actually. We did a ton of it and drove every bit of it. we
Oh, wow.
we drove to Missouri one time in a Chevy van, and I'm sorry, we drove to Minnesota. Well, we did both. The first gig I played with them was in Missouri, and we also went to Minnesota in a Chevy van. So we had some good times. There was a lot of road stories from that year. But that turned into to what I'm doing now, because like I said, working for Daryl, Daryl had this project coming up called Appalachian Roadshow, where he was going to stop his own band and collaborate with Barry Abernathy and Jim Van Cleve to start this new band. So I wound up being a part of that, and now I've been playing with the Appalachian Roadshow ever since 2019.
Yeah, and so how has that been? And does it give you the creative expression that you were wanting? Because obviously you're doing a side gig as well, but going from the family band, now you with Daryl, there's obviously an expectation for what he's going to be playing too, right?
Yeah, man, it's amazing what I learned about music just from like the first month of playing with Daryl. And what I mean by that is that when you play in a family band, you all make the same mistakes because you're family and because you grew up playing together. So you got these blind spots that you can't handle. You don't even know they're there. We would do things, we would make the same mistakes together. Like we sounded tight because we were rushing at the same time. So we have that kind of thing going on in the family band. So the first time I played for Daryl and I was accountable to his chop, anybody will tell you Daryl Webb's got one of the best mandolin chops in the business. And the first time I was like, heard that and was accountable to his chop, all these things that I've been hearing on records and stuff and trying to do kind of fell into place. So my groove got way better, and I actually got more proper bluegrass experience in those years, like 2018 and on, because the family band was so progressive and unconventional that I knew a lot about traditional bluegrass, but I hadn't really just played a ton. I'd never played in a 5-piece band before. So it was a little bit of a reversion in terms of like how traditional it was, but that was a good thing. I enjoyed it a lot and still do, where I was able to work on fundamental bluegrass chops instead of just the kind of quirky stuff that would work for the family band. I mean, there was crossover between the two, but you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. Was it all through practice and rehearsals and on stage, or how did you do it?
Mostly on stage because we didn't hardly rehearse at all.
Oh my God! So you're just up there learning in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, he gave me some set lists to learn and stuff like that. But it's funny, my family band was super rehearsed. I mean, literally living together and practicing on a schedule, like after supper every, however many times a week. From that to what I've been doing for the past few years. For one thing, I've lived in North Carolina for most of this time. I just moved to Nashville in 2023. So I was not close to any band that I've played for geographically for a long time. So we would basically, they'd send me stuff to learn and then we go play shows. You might warm up a little bit backstage or something like that. But there was a lot of on-the-job learning, and that was fun and different and kind of
Did you ever have a shit moment?
Yeah, for sure, but fewer than you'd think in the sense that, part of the skill set you develop, especially from improvising and just looking at music a certain way, is like how to recover from and hide mistakes. And I sort of almost live in that flow. Like I don't hardly ever shoot for perfection anymore, so much as I shoot for a feel. So the way that I ground myself in a song has a lot less to do anymore with like memory work and perfection as it does like fundamentally understanding the song and like the patterns of the genres that we're covering and stuff like that. And it gives you this kind of light on your feet, Bruce Lee, move like water kind of thing where you can adapt to different things that happen pretty quickly. So I definitely, took some hits every now and then, but you'd be surprised how many times the audience didn't know.
Yeah, that's wild.
I can't count the number of times I've seen a band and then talk to one of my friends who is more like you, more technically literate, understands what's going on. I'm out there, I've had some beers, I'm like, Shay likes sound, Shay dance, like that's what I'm there for. But and then after the show, my friend will be like, "Oh, did you hear where they messed up this, that, or this bridge?" And I'm like, "I don't know what any of that means. It sounded great to me. I thought it was great." That's got to be it's at a certain point, it's got to be kind of freeing to live in that space where you're just shooting for the vibe more than like perfect finger placement and perfect everything else.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. And Daryl was great. Daryl's just kind of a natural showman and band leader. And I'll never forget one time. He did give me a lot of songs to learn, but every now and then he would pull out something that he hadn't even talked about as even a thought. And I'll never forget one time he decided it was time for a country segment in the show. And he hit a B chord on his mandolin and went, "Son, key a B. Just because I asked a friend about her," and just started singing George Jones. And I was just like looking at the bass player like, "Throw me some sevens, man, so I know when the fours are coming up. We'll figure this out together." And we did, and it was fine. But he would do things like that every now and then, and it got to be fun.
That's amazing. And so obviously your vast knowledge, and he knew that, right? He's like, "Hey, I know this guy enough that he can pick this up." But so chord progression is one thing. When was it in your career that you started writing your own lyrics?
I hardly ever have. I write more instrumentals than vocal tunes. And some of the vocal tunes I've written, I've tried to let die into obscurity on my Family Band records. But the on my new record, I wrote Seattle Blues, the lead-off track on the record, because that was a traditional blues form. So it did a lot of the work for me where I could just take a form that I was familiar with, that's such a, often repeated traditional form, and just put my life experience lyrics into it. So I still have a long way to go as a lyricist, but I've spent way more time writing instrumentals.
Well, and that's why I wanted to ask, because I had seen in the Family Band that there were some, right? And then I didn't know on this album, which is interesting. So your ass was really flying from Washington State to North Carolina for a girl?
At one time, yeah.
Golly, Zeb, that's dedication, brother.
Wait, when you do music for a living, you meet people in different ways. You don't when you're on the road more than you're home.
That is the cleanest way to say that. But that's awesome that it wasn't just like, "Hey, I'll hit you on the next stop in Washington," right? Like,
yeah,
it turned into something, and then obviously it left enough emotions to write this powerful song. So then, but before I jump into some of that stuff, like, how was it working with Daryl and his lyrics, and then being able to play with that? Were they writing any new music? And were you part of that?
Okay, so with Daryl's band, we didn't do much original material. There might have been one or two songs, but the Appalachian Roadshow. So I've been way more involved with the creative side of the roadshow, especially as time's gone on. Their first album was actually mostly session musicians because they were just getting started. They put the album out before we started touring because the Appalachian Roadshow itself is kind of a concept that's turned more stably into a band. But the roadshow thing is all about having a specific focus in bluegrass, and it's not really a total traditionalist thing like it might seem at face value. There's a lot of tradition to it, but it's very interpretive. So obviously it's all centered around Appalachian history and culture with our own musical spin on these things, because we can be pretty progressive at times, but it's grounded with a certain branding and a certain idea and a certain focus. And also the Appalachian side of things opens up the music even more because, Appalachian old time music is like hundreds of years older than bluegrass. Bluegrass is like 5 years older than rock and roll. Bluegrass was born in the mid 40s. So it's actually a pretty young genre, but the roots go back to immigrants, bringing these songs over from their different cultures as they came to this country. You can't even trace some of these old songs back to a definitive starting point. So the roadshow has like even more stuff to pull from with that. We're pulling from old time and bluegrass and even like gospel quartet stuff and just different aspects of this entire culture. So we do all that. We put our own spin on it. We've got, a great group of musicians. Not speaking of myself, I'm just glad to be playing with all these guys because I grew up listening to all of them one way or another. I mean, our banjo player, Barry Abernathy, and our fiddle player, Jim Van Cleve, they were founding members of Mountain Heart, and Mountain Heart was hugely influential on my generation of bluegrass musicians. And then I've known Daryl forever. And then Todd Phillips plays bass for us. So game over. he played for Tony Rice and for David Greer and for Joan Baez and just you name it, he's done it. He's the man. He's the blueprint. So getting to play with him is like going to college.
Which is amazing. So then, but for you, there was still something that you weren't getting out of that experience, right? Because now let's talk about the album, right? And so we've talked about a couple of songs on it, but what I wanted to kind of lead up to was, what was it that you were searching for? What did you want to do? What was the time frame, right? Like how long have you been thinking about doing this?
Well, and I will say just right before I move on from that is the roadshow has welcomed me into the creative process more and more. So especially like the Tribulation album was the first one I was on. I was more involved with that. The Jubilation album I had, had even more input and they've kept on giving me more and more. We got a new record coming out this year and it's the most I've ever contributed to a studio project that the band has done. So I'm actually, when it came to doing my own thing, it was more about just having stuff that I wanted to do that was not supposed to be done with the roadshow. So it was never about getting turned down where they told me like, no, you can't do that. It was more like, no, I don't want to do this stuff here. I know it's not right. Like I understand the roadshow, I understand what I want to bring to what they're doing. And then I have these other ideas that don't fit and shouldn't. So I'm going to do them over here. And I've been thinking about doing a solo project for years. I mean, my last family band record, I think, was like 2016 or 17, so it's been a minute.
Yeah, 2017.
Yeah, and so I've been thinking about it, and for years I've been thinking about it, but I couldn't really focus the idea down. Like, one day I'd be thinking about going all electric. One day it'd be all instrumental. One day it'd be having guest vocalists. I had all kinds of different iterations of what I was thinking about. And I kind of wasn't sure what I was going to do for a long time. I think it was in 2023. I was kind of at a low in my personal life, and I was just feeling down and sorry for myself and working around my house back in North Carolina. And I was taking the day just to kind of work around the house and not work on music and stuff. But I had my headphones in and I was listening to Hot Tuna, some of their early albums, which are so deep blues rooted. I mean, it's mostly acoustic and it's so gritty and fundamental. And I was listening to that and just everything kind of came together over that time. Sometimes when you're just doing menial things around the house, you can actually think, that sort of mindless stuff, and having some music in your ears, it just sort of makes your brain fire in a way that it can't any other way. So it just kind of hit me. I need to do a blues album, and I'm not necessarily going to do traditional blues, but using blues as kind of a big umbrella label for what I'm going to do is going to make the whole thing work. And it did.
Blues and bluegrass.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's 4 instrumentals on the album, and I wrote all them. And I'd had them, most of them written, all of them written for years, but I wasn't sure what to do with them because the way that I was writing, just sort of by default, was they were all solo guitar pieces to start with. There's a lot of hybrid picking on them where I'm playing with my pick and my fingers and doing like a combination of flat picking and finger picking. And I would write, just because I was sitting there by myself at the house, I would write these self-sustaining pieces and be like, well, that's cool, but I'm not sure where it's going to go. so I was able to kind of round up all those songs, and a lot of those songs I had written when I was feeling pretty low or whatever, and they were kind of like just extensions of emotions. Not all of them, but a lot of them are pretty heavy, especially for instrumentals. So I like labeling the album as blues gave those songs a home, and I was able to figure out, how to add other instruments into them and how to fit them together on a project. And then I started picking out covers, and then I wrote that one song, Seattle Blues. So that's the only vocal tune I wrote on the album. Every other vocal tune is a cover, but that's kind of how it came together, just in terms of the creative genesis of it.
And then how did you put together, because you have some amazing musicians sitting with you on this album. How did that come about?
Well, man, Jason Carter is one of my best friends in the music business in here in town in Nashville, and one of my favorite fiddle players. I mean, the Del McCurry Band was one of the first bands I ever listened to in bluegrass, so I've been listening to Jason literally my whole life. And he filled in for the Appalachian Roadshow a few times over the past few years when Jimmy couldn't make it to a show, which hadn't been very often. But Jason is the only guy that's ever filled in for Jimmy, and crushed. And I got to know him, and he's the greatest guy ever, and one of the funniest human beings alive. Yeah,
we've been lucky. We've been lucky to have him on. I was just talking with another musician buddy of mine in Ohio this morning that like he's just so genuine, right? Like he is, man. Unapologetically himself. He's like a real dude, and he's just so kind and cordial.
Yeah, no, he's the man, dude. Any time on the road with him is a good time. But I knew that he would be the right kind of thing for the album I was putting together. I could hear his style in my imagination on the songs I was putting together, and there's a ton of stuff about Jason's style that's the reason for that. But one thing I can point to in particular is how much Jason loves Vassar. And I could hear like Vassar stuff on these songs. And I didn't even really vocalize that, but in the studio, there'd be a song where I'd heard that, and Jason would crush a Vassar Clements lick, and I'd be like, there it is. But it always sounds like Jason. I'm not putting him in a box there. He always is like unmistakable.
He's a phenomenal fiddle player, right? And we know he can work his way around that.
The best, man. But Jason was a natural call for me, and then Todd Phillips, he plays bass in the Roadshow, and he's a great friend and mentor of mine, and he really has been with me on every step of this project. I remember talking to him about the idea as soon as I had it, and knowing that he would kind of get what I was going for. And there was even one particular time that we played a gig in Lexington, Kentucky, and he rode with me all the way back to Nashville after the gig. And we like listened to my demos the whole way and talked about the project, and he just really took the time. So he was there for every bit of it, man. I mean, he's the best bass player I know, and one of the best musicians I've ever been in the same room with. And also just like the right call for the project. I knew that he would have the exact right ideas. So that was natural. And then kind of the same thing with Sam Bush. It's like, Sam Bush is one of my favorite musicians on any instrument, any genre ever. Like, he's one of my top 5 influences in the entirety of music. So when I hear mandolin on something, that's what I hear. So you come to this question of like, what can I do aside from just call him and see if he'll do it? Like, what can I replace the Sam Bush sound with? You can't, So I just decided to see if he would do it, and he did, and it was amazing.
How'd that conversation go?
Man, like, so down to earth. It's just, I was nervous as hell, but he was nice as he could be. So, it didn't matter that I was nervous. It was just, I think I got his phone number from Jim Van Cleve, and just had a completely normal Nashville-style text and phone conversation chain, and just talked dates and prices and got it lined up, man. Nothing to it. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but it was that easy. And he was, if you ever seen Sam on stage, that's how he is all the time. That's him. It's real. Yeah. He's just like that. He brings the energy to the room, elevates everything. Ton of fun to be around. All the great stories from the road and everything, and just the best mandolin playing of all time. And another thing that really meant a ton to me on this album is that on the last track, on Sunset on 70 West, he plays his national slide mandolin.
Yeah.
And to have written that song and be in the booth recording it and hear him come in on the second part and only having heard that in my imagination up to that moment, that was almost a tearjerker when that happened. So that's one of my favorite moments on the album is when Sam comes in on slide mandolin on Sunset on
So
70
did you
West.
guys all come in together and record together, or did you send them their parts, or how did that work as you guys were constructing the album?
Yeah, it was a pretty traditional recording session. It was supposed to be actually the morning of the session. Todd got sick, so we cut the session without Todd, which was wild because we also cut it without a click track. So it was a little bit of a risk. It was a pretty organic.
Just making sure you guys are on pace. That's insane.
Yeah. I talked to Sam about it, and I think he said. He asked if we should use one since Todd wasn't there, and I was like, let's try it without it, see what happens, because I wanted it to feel how things feel without a click track, and it worked out, but it was a risk. But yeah, other than that, me and Jason and Sam recorded together, like, old school style, and isolation booths and everything. It's not like we were around one mic, but everybody was there.
While we were doing it.
Everybody was there and just had a traditional session for a couple days, and then Todd did an amazing job overdubbing his stuff later, because I think it almost turned into a different kind of art form for him because he was doing it at home. So he kind of took he took his time with it and kind of refined everything. I would get multiple emails from him in a day where he would like send it to me, and then like an hour later I get another email. Man, I don't like what I played there. Check this out. And I was like liking everything he sent, and I just wait till he had finished his own process and then go, yep, you're good. I knew it would be killer, and it is.
It is, and it's an amazing album front to back. And so how has it been changing for you on a solo project? Not only getting in, recording it, you have to promote it, right? And are you going to be touring? What's going on?
Man, I hope to tour some. I haven't even started moving on that yet. I really should, but this is my first time putting out a project like this. With my family band, my parents handled a ton of the technical side of things, putting out the albums. I mean, the creative stuff was mine, but they handled a lot of the grunt work. So I'm doing this, no record label, no nothing, just putting it out myself. And it's been exhausting and rewarding and expensive and all of the above. And I've learned a lot from it. So I'm learning on the job, and I'm also kind of working around my schedule. So I'm kind of always catching up, really. Because
you're still teaching, right?
I'm still teaching full time, man. And that's the thing. Like, I've also, I play with the Appalachian Roadshow full time, and I'm like fully invested in that in every way. We're doing a show this weekend at Gettysburg Bluegrass Festival with Daryl Scott on Friday night. Can't wait for that. One of my favorite musicians ever. So Roadshow full time, and then I'm also playing with Jason on the side anytime I can.
I've seen y'all post some videos, and you're having fun.
It's so much fun, man. And I filled in with Brahma and Keith Hines this past month, and I play with a band called Indigo Roots out of Nashville every now and then. So there's always something going on. So I'll kind of go underground for a few weeks doing all that stuff, and then as soon as I get a breath of air, I'll work on the album. So it's coming along in shifts. I just ordered my hard copies for the CDs yesterday, and I'll make an announcement when those are out. But I'm just kind of learning what I can and doing it when I get to it, and figuring it all out. And it's a lot of fun, and it's a little stressful, and I'm just glad I did it overall.
Well, it is a beautiful album, and so it is available on all the streaming platforms, correct?
Yep.
Where can people go and purchase it so that they can support you, so that you can? It's not all about money, but we got to make sure that these guys recoup their funds, and we can afford to get you on the road. So where can people go support you?
Well, I appreciate it, man. It's right now, I think as far as purchasing the album, Amazon and iTunes will be your options, because I only have digital purchases available right now. So, first of all, I'd like to encourage everybody to stream it, because I was really down with that when I made this record. I know what the current music business scene looks like, and I care about it just being heard and being out there as much as anything. So please stream it, and I appreciate every single click on that. But as far as a place that you can purchase a download, it'd be iTunes and Amazon. And then when I have hard copies in hand, I'll be putting up announcements. So if you just follow all my socials, Instagram's probably one of the best. Instagram and Facebook, Zeb Snyder Music on Instagram, and I keep posting stuff regular. And my YouTube channel, it needs to be updated, but I've got some stuff that'll be coming pretty soon to promote the album on YouTube. So any of my socials, you can keep up with what I'm doing and kind of see when hard copies are coming along, and when I might have some shows together too. I'm working on it, but we're not quite ready for shows yet.
Zeb Snyder does not like free time.
I was just sitting here thinking, man, when do you eat?
Dude,
that's wild. Like, I'm even surprised you sat down to talk to us knuckleheads today based on the schedule it sounds like you've got, dude. Like, that's crazy.
Oh man, first of all, I appreciate y'all making the time and having me on, but no, man, I do stay pretty insanely busy. I've got a vacation scheduled for next weekend for like the first time in 2 years, because it's about time. I'm feeling it, but overall, it's what I love doing.
Leave the phone, just leave it.
That's the plan, man. But no, I mean, you have to hustle to do the music business, and you have to do a bunch of different things, and I'm all about that, and I'm trying to stay really conscious of the fact that I get to do this, and I'm grateful to do it, and that helps your attitude when things are getting when you're getting low on sleep, when you've been on the road a few days and stuff like that. It's good to think about. If I'd told my 12-year-old self, hey, you're not going to believe how much you're going to tour in April and May of 2025, I'd have been like, oh, hell yeah, let's do it. So I try to remember that.
That's awesome, man. Well, we can't thank you enough, Zeb. We'll make sure that we have all your socials out there. Follow him, support him. If you're in the area, go check it out. Appalachian Roadshow, go check them out. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank y'all.
Yeah, man.